Hi, I'm Jen Huzzy from jenniferhuzzy.com and Circles of Women. We're talking today about birth plans and how to write a really effective birth plan. So here are the things we'll be covering today. I'll be sharing with you the top 3 mistakes that people make when putting together a birth plan. We'll discuss ways to uncover and explore your needs around birth, ways to discuss and effectively communicate your needs with the people around you, and how to make sure that your birth plan is really adhered to as best as possible. So let's get right into it and talk about the top 3 mistakes people make with birth plans and what you can do instead. So I would say the absolute first thing that people do wrong is not writing a birth plan. You can use this to put your thoughts in order. You can use it to set up a list for your partner and support people in ways and how to help you. You can use it to keep track of the different aspects of your birth that you've researched and considered and made decisions about. You can use it as a tool to communicate in a fractured maternity system. Who knows who will be there on the day? You can use it as a tool to communicate in what can be really often a fractured maternity system. The next mistake that people make is treating their birth plan as a list of demands. And that's not to say that you can't make demands. It's your birth and you can make any decision you choose. But there is a common misbelief that birth plans are just a list of demands that women make that are unreasonable and that it's without wanting to engage their care provider. And this is really false. Birth plans are really most effective when they're used as a tool to help women navigate the system, figure out what they need, and then communicate their needs with the person caring for them. The next big mistake that people make is writing way too much and presenting what is essentially a novel to your care provider. What we're going to get in today is different kinds of birth plans that you might make, what each person will actually need to know that's caring for you, and how to whittle it down to what's really essential for each person who's near you. And the final mistake, because I actually gave you 4, the final big mistake that people make when putting together a birth plan is letting the details stop and confuse you. I hear a lot of discussion about using the term birth plan versus birth intention. Really, it doesn't matter. You can use whatever you feel comfortable with. If you feel like saying that this is something that you feel strongly and have put into place and it's a plan, then go ahead and use that term, and there's nothing wrong with it. If you feel as though you're really conscious about putting stuff offside and that using the term birth intention is somehow softer, that's absolutely fine. There are written birth plans and visual birth plans. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. The main thing is that you say what you want. You know that you're completely at liberty to ask for what you need around birth and that you communicate that with the people around you. So let's dive right into uncovering and exploring your personal needs. So what the heck do I mean by your personal needs? And if you haven't seen my previous videos, then please just jump back on jenniferhuzzy.com/birth-plans. And you can see a whole lot of information about the history of birth plans, what birth plans are all about, and some of the common misconceptions around birth plans. But what I'm going to talk about really briefly today is the personal needs around birth, because what we have to understand is birth is really social. It's not just this medical event. It has huge implications for our lives and our identities. Mostly healthy women are the ones who give birth. And it's a pretty healthy thing to do. We have to be, at some level of optimum health for our bodies to function in that way. In circumstances where a woman and a baby do not fit in the normal mold, meaning that everything in their pregnancy and their labor and their birth has been, without any incident, it's even more important that we don't get caught up in the system and we remain involved in our care. Sometimes in the moment itself, it's hard to even see why this is important. And we really do have a lot of trust in the experts that are supposed to know best, which actually might be true clinically. But there are many decisions that have multiple options. And what factors are important or not important to our care providers may or may not be what's important to us. And how much are they asking us our thoughts and about the options around our own care? So we're going to have an exercise right now. It will take a few minutes. Get comfortable, find a nice place to sit. You can sit upright, you can lie down, you can open your eyes, you can close your eyes, whatever feels comfortable to you. So just take this moment and notice your breath for a minute. Notice how it feels when it fills you, and notice how it flows out. Notice how you don't need to do anything to breathe, that your body does this without any need to actively help. Imagine yourself near the end of your pregnancy. Feel the sensations. What are you doing? Where are you? Where do you go in your labour? Do you labour? How does the birth progress? Who is with you? What are you wearing? Notice the sights, the smells, the sounds. Pay particular attention to how you are feeling. Are you feeling safe? Are you feeling secure? Do you feel powerful and calm? And just note this feeling. What is making you feel this way? What is helping you? What would cause this to stop? How is your birth progressing? How is your baby born? What is his environment like? How is your baby received? What is it like to hold your baby? What does this scene look like? Bring up the colour in this picture and notice all the details. What is really important to you here? How is this making you feel? Notice all the aspects that are giving you the positive feelings. And what elements are important here? Keep this vision in your mind and cast forward 6 weeks' time. You have a beautiful newborn and you're home with your family. What does this wonderful moment look like and why? Really notice the sounds, the smells, the tastes. How is it feeling? Are you holding your baby? Are there any physical sensations? Look around. What is here with you and what is helping you? Keeping these scenes in your mind, you can closely look and zoom into any area that needs clarification. When you're ready, you'll be able to recall the important elements of this scene and draw on them. If your eyes were closed, now's the time to open them. Have a little shuffle in your seat, wiggle your fingers and wiggle your toes. All right. Just in that moment, really try and think about what was coming up for you. Is that the first time that you've just taken a moment to think about all the different things that will be happening around you during your birth? Or have you spent some time already kind of imagining what that might be and paying attention to, the things that you're really fearful of and the things that you're really excited about? Now you can write it all down. This is a really great way to get started. You can rewind this video or audio and listen again. This time, you don't need to close your eyes, but keep a pen and paper and write down the elements as they come to you. Now we get into a bit more of a detailed area in terms of writing our birth plan. And one of the things that we want to start taking a note of are there any challenges that you're already aware about? So things that might be causing roadblocks or bumps in the way between where you are now and where you want to be. So some things you might need to think about if there's pre-existing medical conditions, what the beliefs of your care provider are, what the local health policy in your hospital or area health service or doctor or midwife, and if there's a wider policy, so that's usually like a state policy or a policy in your country. Have you already been told about certain expectations about how you will give birth, what that will look like and sound like? Also, looking at what are the norms in your area and your birth space. Do you know what usually happens in the place that you give birth or with the people or person that you're birthing with? That's usually a really good indication, actually, of what is more likely to happen statistically. And then I guess the other thing we want to think about in terms of challenges is there anything that you want or need but you don't actually have? So again, starting to write these things down will help you figure out what areas you need to perhaps learn more about, look more into, maybe negotiate, things that you might need to put in place in order to have your needs met. So if you haven't downloaded my birth plan brainstorming kit, then now's the time. You can definitely use this as your one-stop shop to kind of get your thoughts in order. So you've got those lovely bits of paper that you've written down all your thoughts about your ideal birth. You've written down what you think might be the roadblocks. And now you have a space for you to start to organize those thoughts into categories, into ways that might be really functional for you to go back and work on the areas that you want to work on. So as you can see, it's really just a list of headings. It's really just pages and pages of headings. And this is an empty document mostly, which is a really great place to start. You'll notice a great many headings, and some of them which make sense and others which will leave you scratching your head. Your job is to dive into each area and write down your thoughts and feelings about each area. Some of the headings will jump out at you and you'll already have thoughts and ideas to help you fill in the blanks. Are you finding that the headings make no sense to you? Well, if that's what's happening, it might mean that this is really an important area or a clue for you to start asking questions and looking for more information. This might take a while. Those first few processes of thinking about what you want, thinking about what might be in the way, and then looking into other areas and elements around birthing and parenting. This could really take someone an hour, or it could take you days and weeks. But it really is as limitless as your needs are, so you really can get out of it as much as you want to put in. But the next step on our list is really to discuss this with your care provider, and this is so important. So often women have approached me when I'm working as a doula, working as a childbirth educator, wanting to put birth plans in place, but being intimidated or anxious or unable to talk about it with their care provider for a variety of reasons. And at the end of the day, this is probably one of the most important elements of this whole decision making, because at the end of the day, it really is them who's going to be there helping you achieve your goals. So please discuss your vision with your care provider and have a frank and honest discussion. Ask them, how likely is this? How often do they support births like that? Is there anything that they could think might stop this from happening?
and really, really listen. Because are they telling you kind of what you want to hear? Are they actually saying to you, this is something I've never done before? Because that would be probably something you need to listen to. Are they saying, yep, this is totally going to happen, this happens all the time? And you might ask them, in what situations would this not happen in? For example, if you're planning a water birth, but there are no birthing tub facilities in the place where you're planning to give birth, I'd say that'd be a very big red flag. Being aligned with your care provider can actually have the greatest impact on your birth choices. People think that, getting a doula is the problem solver, and definitely it's good to have any support on your side. However, if you're choosing a care provider that is really aligned with your thoughts and your plans, in addition to all the extra support, this is the absolute best option. Because at the end of the day, if there is a grey area, or if there's an either or option, you want to know that they'll be leaning on the side that is aligned with what you want and you need out of your birthing and out of your parenting and out of your goals for the future. So the next step is really putting it all together. And this is something that happens again and again and again. And this becomes very cyclic. So what we're doing is we're writing down our thoughts and our questions, based on all of that information, all that data we've just put together, based on your ideal birth, thinking about all the different aspects and having this conversation with your care provider. You will be left, assumingly, with a whole bunch of thoughts and questions. And this is when you do your research. And on the following pages, I will actually list a few sources for general information and a few academic sources. There are, of course, many, many more. And if you're looking for some specific sources, I'm always happy to hear from you. And you can email me at jen@jenniferhuzzy.com. But this is the time when you start to look into, what have you been told, and how does that align with what the evidence says, or the likelihood of that happening, and what does that mean for you and your family? The next thing you do is start to write your conclusions, and these are obviously sort of your draft conclusions, and you might find that you gain or lose opinions about interventions, options, and aspects of your care as you go through this process. And then, of course, we come back to discussing and communicating. So rinse, repeat. Here is the beauty of a real working plan. It changes. It develops and evolves as your knowledge does. So knowledge of yourself, knowledge of your thoughts, your options, and what you are or are not willing to change. And as you discuss this with your care provider, you might find that your opinions change, and that you need more information, or that the need for your information increases, and perhaps your resolve is stronger. And it's possible that you'll come to a space where you realize the person caring for you isn't able to give you what you need. And so then you'll start looking into what your other options are. Is it, viable for you to stay with this person and have other support, or are you thinking of moving your care somewhere else? And whatever your choices are, they're completely fine, and there's yours to make, and there's never a too late kind of stage. So this is where we can have a look for some information. And like I said, there are, many, many places that you can look. But I would caution you to think about who's actually writing this information. So whatever you're looking at, whether it's a blog post, whether it's an internet page, whatever it is, just it's always have a good look to see who's actually writing it and what their agenda is, or what their thoughts are. What are they getting out of writing this information? So an independent childbirth educator should be able to offer you evidence-based information that's really tailored to your specific needs. By independent childbirth educator, I mean someone who isn't employed by an institution, hospital or birth centre where you receive your care, because they may be restricted in some of the things that they share with you, in terms of policy, or they may just not discuss certain things with you because it's not an option for the place where you're birthing. Another place you can look is policies. It's just good to kind of know what is expected in terms of like the institutions where you're giving birth. A policy isn't law. It doesn't mean that you have to do what's written in the policy, but a lot of women don't understand that there's a sort of standardized care that's for most, if not all women. And it's nice not to be blindsided. So if you want to know, if someone has gestational diabetes and you want to know what is the normal expected kind of way to be cared for, then have a look at the policies and it will tell you, if there's an expectation for you to be induced, when that might be, what that might look like. Other places that you can look on a more global scale are places like the NICE guidelines, the Cochrane, and Evidence-Based Birth. These are, these are free to access websites with lots of really good quality evidence-based information on a range of topics. Some of them are a lot more academic and some of them are really written for consumers. So depending on what your needs are, how much information you want on a certain topic and how deep you really want to go, you might find any or all of these are really useful to you. And of course, you can ask your care provider. So you can ask your doctor, your midwife, your GP, whoever's looking after you for evidence. If there's a suggestion about a birth plan or if there's a suggestion about an intervention or a lack of intervention, you can ask them, why is that? What's the evidence to support that? Do you have some more information for me to take home? And if there's handouts or patient leaflets, then you should be able to look to see what evidence they're actually quoting, so that we're not just, listening to someone's opinion, but what we want to understand is what are they basing their opinion on? Is it, their own personal experience, which, is not nothing, or is it the experiences of hundreds or thousands of people, which holds, definitely a lot more weight and a lot more stock in terms of if it's good quality evidence. But definitely look and definitely ask. And if, this is something that's important to you, then I would absolutely encourage you to look at a few different areas for some good information, for you to start to put it all together. And then we do it again. We go back again and we write down our thoughts and we write down our questions and we do a bit more research and we write down our conclusions and then we come back and we discuss and communicate. And this process you can go through as many times as you need. If you're getting all your questions answered and your conclusions are, complete, then great, job done. But if you get to the end of it and then you have this conversation with your care provider and you leave thinking, wow, there's a whole bunch more questions that have opened up, or this isn't the way I thought it was going to go, then you might find you need to go back through that process again and again until you're left with something that you feel really confident and settled with. And so what do we do with all this information? As I mentioned, one of the biggest problems I see with birth plans is their sheer size. And it should be obvious to you that all this work you're doing will leave you with pages and pages of information and questions and evidence and discussion. And so how do we turn this into something workable? Because this is, unfortunately, at this point is often where a lot of people finish. And, they kind of present their birth plan when they come into labour, and it's just actually usually not very helpful. One of the reasons I really recommend you going back to your care provider as many times as you need to is we know that in order for labour and birth to progress in a really normal way, we want to have as little adrenaline and cortisol and all of those stress hormones around us. We want them to be minimised, and we want to increase the amount of oxytocin and endorphins, all those feel-good hormones. And we know that, this sort of work, this really higher functioning brain work, where we're using our neocortex and all our thinking and reasoning skills, and maybe we're feeling threatened or stressed or anxious, this is not the kind of work we want to do in our birthing time. This is the kind of work we want to get done and dusted before we go into labour. So, I know it can be really daunting to have this sort of discussion with your care provider, but that should really be a red flag in itself, to be honest with you. But if you, if you put the work in your pregnancy, the payoff is definitely going to be, when you're going into labour and during your birth, because you're going to feel so secure in knowing what to expect and what you can do to really help yourself. And so turning all of this information into something workable, how do we get all this information into something your midwife, your doctor, your partner, your doula, your support person, your mother-in-law, whoever's with you, will be able to read and easily read it and actually put it into use? So the different people in your life around this time all need different information to be able to help you. And a huge mistake that people make is giving all the same information to everyone. And the truth is, this in itself can cause birth plans to be really ineffective. So you need to ask yourself, what does this person need to know to be able to help me? So for example, who needs to know what aromatherapy you're using? So you might mention it in an appointment with your midwife and gauge her response. She might tell you aromatherapy is fine, but candles aren't safe in the hospital because there's oxygen tanks everywhere. So make sure that you have an electric burner or a humidifier. Or they might suggest alternative ways to use the oils. So do you need to put this information in your birth plan? So I would say, A, if there's any issues with its use, like according to your doctor or your midwife or your care provider, then in this case I would write it in your birth plan. So if you've said you want to use essential oils and whoever's caring for you says, oh no, you can't use essential oils here, then yes, that would be something you'd need to negotiate, you'd need to talk about, and it would have to be written in your birth plan. If this is something that you say and it's like, oh yeah, great, women use them all the time, do whatever you want, I would say that the detailed uses and options and how you're going to use it and when you're going to use it and what you're going to use, that will go into a plan for your partner and your support people. They're the ones who are going to need to know what you're using, where it is, how to use it, all that sort of stuff. And so you can see here, so I've just really generally organised the different sorts of birth plans you might be making. And you might find that you have 4 different birth plans depending on who's with you around the time of birth. So for you yourself, your plan will include everything, no doubt. And you will definitely put in things like the affirmations that you're using, any fears that you've worked through, any concerns, any comfort measures. It's really like a master list of everything you need to know, including everything else. For your partner, you might include things like comfort measures, some information about important medical decisions that you've made so that they're on board and they have something written down in your hand to kind of give them the extra confidence to support you in that. You'll tell them about any specific plans about the birth environment or anything that has been contentious so that they're prepared and they know, how to back you up. Any checklists that you need them to know or any medical decisions that have been made for you. And of course, most partners also have a list about what to take. So when you're labouring in early labour, they know, what to kind of make sure that is in the bag so that you can leave the door at the right time. So other support people probably need to know about what your partner needs to know. So your partner may have very specific needs, and if their job is to support the both of you, they'll need to know not just about your needs, but about what the partner is going to need during labour. So they might on their list have, remember to bring some sandwiches so that everybody has something to eat, or whatever it is that you decide. They'll definitely need to know about your choices, about, pharmacological or non-pharmacological choices in terms of therapies and working with pain in labour. They'll want to know what their role specifically is. They'll need to know where to find what they need. So if they're setting up the birth environment, they'll need to know where the candles are or where the fairy lights are and things like that. And it's always good to give them a do and do not list, particularly if you're having support people who maybe you're worried they're not going to be completely supportive. Sometimes we have family members come with us and we're a bit anxious about, will they be overstepping the mark? When will they be in the room? When do they have to leave the room? So really writing these things down in a really non-confrontational kind of way is great because it just puts things really clearly for you, for them, for everyone involved. And then we get onto the plan for the birth, your care provider and other medical people. This is, traditionally what we talk about as the birth plan. And so definitely here we're putting medical decisions. So for example, if you're wanting a physiological third stage and just optimum cord clamping, then this would be something you would want to write because the person who's caring for you is going to be either clamping and cutting the umbilical cord or not, generally speaking. And so we want them to know what your plans are around that. If you, have discussed or concerned about an episiotomy, definitely I'd be writing those things in there, and any care that's outside of policy. Okay, so just going through this again one more time really quickly. Your plan will probably be the longest. It can be in whatever form that works for you. It's yours. It's absolutely for you. So it might be all the plans, from all the notes and everything, from everything you've written, or it might be just bullet points. It's your information, and the idea is it's useful for you. Your partner's plan, you know what, they might write it themselves. That can be very helpful. It might be just a front page with some bullet points followed by some more in-depth details if they want to go and, they need to know a bit more. On the front you might have, things that I'd like to use, acupressure, heat packs, aromatherapy. And then a couple of pages in, it might be, a few of the points for acupressure, or it might be what specific aromatherapy, or, where the heat packs are found. So the idea is that it will be helpful for them, to access and use throughout your labour to be able to support you. Other support people, it might be similar to the partner's plan, but you might find that you're writing it for them, or that, if you have a doula or, a support person who's really involved in that way, they might write it themselves, I guess, with your consultation, obviously. And then, what we probably find ourselves talking most about is the birth plan for your care provider and other medical staff. So this will probably be the most succinct. It has definitely needs the most organisation. The entire point of this plan is to help you communicate with your care provider or medical staff. It's traditionally, this is the main reason that birth plans are created. And it may be more complex and complicated, but helpful with complex pregnancy needs. Actually, different staff might need different plans. This might be important if there's people that you don't know will be caring for you in your pregnancy. If you have complex pregnancy needs, like we're saying, if you had comorbidities, things like gestational diabetes, or if you had, pre-existing high blood pressure, or you've developed high blood pressure in your pregnancy, maybe you're having twins, something that sits outside of that realm of, black and white normal. If you're declining care, so if there's anything that you've decided, I know that's policy, but I just don't want that, this plan will be very important for you. If you're wanting to negotiate care outside of what's normal with the people caring for you. So it might be usual for the doctor or midwife looking for you to do episiotomies, but you've decided that you will not have one, then that will definitely be something you need to include in your birth plan. Or if you have concerns that you're not being listened to. So, that's actually really concerning in itself. But I do recognise that some women don't have choices about where they're giving birth and who they're giving birth with, and can have a lot of fear that when it comes to the crunch, you're in a vulnerable position and that someone won't listen to you. So having things written down, worked through, talked through, signed off, really can help you feel confident that someone's actually going to listen to your needs in that space. So keep talking. Like we said, it's all about communication. So make the most of it and make the most, benefit out of this plan. And it will be the most beneficial if you use it as a communication tool, not as just this list of demands that are presented on the day, although it can be that. But the most effective way for this to be used is if you're using it to talk with the person who's caring for you. You might find also that as you're talking about this, particularly in your pregnancy, some of the things that you're very worried about are actually standard, or they don't even need to be concluded. Other things might require more than just a simple birth plan. So, for example, I see a lot of birth plans on the internet. They talk about eye ointment. It's generally something that's not given in Australian hospitals, and certainly not something that would be standard for a lot of places. But if it's something that you're concerned about, I would mention it in your pregnancy, and your midwife or doctor might just say, look, that's a non-event. You don't even have to worry about that. We're not doing that here. So having a conversation about your needs is really important. About when we are wanting care that's against the standard medical advice. So if after discussion with your care provider, your own research, discussion and reflection, you decide that standard care and policy is not right for you and your baby, you might be asked to write a formal letter outlining your decision and explaining that you understand the situation and your decision. You might be asked to sign a form explaining that you're wanting to opt for care against medical advice. This will probably detail the specific area that you're opting different care in. Forms and letters like this are there to ensure that medical staff have, I guess, in a way, discharged their responsibility. And it sometimes can prevent being asked the same question multiple times. And they have to be sure that an example of this some women will opt for intermittent monitoring instead of continuous monitoring after just, in their own decision making, and it might be not the policy of the place where you're giving birth for that to happen. In these situations, it's almost, every single person they meet throughout their pregnancy, and certainly every single person they meet in their labour, may feel the need to have this conversation with you to ensure that, that basically if something was to go wrong, that they've, written that I've had this discussion and that she's declined it. If you in your pregnancy have decided that 100% that's something you don't want, and you want to write a formal letter or sign these forms that, you're opting for care against medical advice, it may prevent you being asked these questions multiple times in your birth. Obviously it helps not to have these, stressful conversations when you're actually trying to go into labour. So just a really quick word about women-centred care. So women-centred care focuses on the women's unique needs, expectations, aspirations, and recognises her right to self-determination in terms of choice, control, continuity of care. It addresses her social, emotional, physical, psychological, spiritual, cultural needs and expectations. It also acknowledges that a woman and her unborn baby do not exist independently of the woman's social and emotional environment, and incorporates this understanding in assessment and provision of healthcare. So why does that matter? Why does that matter? Because when you're making decisions around your birth and around your parenting and with your baby, it's important for us to understand that women-centered care, the idea of you being in the middle of your care, is actually something that's in policy, and it's something that's important, and it's something that, it doesn't just mean that your uterus is what we're looking at, and it shouldn't be that. When you're having a baby, it's a social event. It's not just it's certainly not a medical event, actually, although we make it into one quite a lot. So if you find that there are spiritual needs that aren't being met, and all the focus is on your physical needs, or that you're feeling that you don't have any choice, or you're feeling that your psychological needs aren't being met, or that your emotional needs aren't being met, or your social needs aren't being met, these are actually all aspects of your care that need to be taken into consideration. And this is one of the reasons birth plans can be very powerful, because hopefully what they're doing is they're helping you to be in the center of your care, in the middle of this decision making, because you're the one who's got an awareness of all of these other aspects of what's happening in your life, whereas your doctor or midwife will probably only know as much as you tell them, but they'll be more focused on your physical well-being and the well-being of your baby. So if you bring all these other aspects to your decision making, that's totally fine. And if not just fine, that's part of what we consider to be the best care possible. So what policy is it's standard care for all women, and women-centered care takes into account your needs, not just the medical needs. So now we move on to the next part, which is really the communicating your needs, the final kind of hurrah. So I highly recommend that you present your final plan to your care provider by 36 weeks in your pregnancy. If for some reason you're expecting an earlier due date, so if you're having multiples or there's other issues going on, then I would say if you can, try to discuss this at least 3 weeks before your estimated due date. That I would say particularly if you're wanting to negotiate your care out of policy, because these things can take time to discuss, and you might need to find a consultant to talk to, and that can take a couple of weeks. Obviously you've been having these conversations throughout your pregnancy, but if you want something really written in stone, that would be the latest kind of date that I would recommend, if you can, to bring it in and have it discussed. I would say that the final plan for your care provider ideally needs to be 1 page or less. If you can put it into a half a page, even better. I personally don't think you need to worry too much about the niceties and introduction, because you'll be having this conversation with this piece of paper. You're not just throwing it at somebody. You're saying, I've written down a list of things that I need, I'm concerned about. A lot of women write at the top of their birth plans, in case something goes wrong. Obviously, I'm open to change, I'm open to discussion. If you feel better writing that, you can. I don't think it's necessary in terms of what you're trying to achieve from this document. Like you said, you're not just throwing it at somebody when you're in the throes of labour. You're having this conversation with people about this, and you've just it's really just something to write down your thoughts to. However, if you feel, more comfortable using, terms like birth preferences, or you feel like you want to write like, I'm open to conversation if anything changes, then, go ahead, do whatever feels right for you. Ideally, have it placed in your notes and signed by your care provider. So again, it's just saying that, if someone's looked over this in your pregnancy, when you go into labour, you'll have a copy in your notes, you'll have a copy for yourself. And so that, you can show that someone's already had these conversations with you. So if there are trickier points, then, it's obvious to everybody that you've gone out of your way to have these discussions before birth. And keep it relevant. So just as you're writing, think, does this person need to know all of this information? And if they don't need to know anything, then you don't have to put that in that part of the birth plan. So in conclusion, take your time to brainstorm. Read and learn independent, evidence-based information. Discuss your needs with your care provider and dive deeper. When you are getting your thoughts in order, consider unique plans for different audiences. And present your birth plan and make time to talk it over, all your questions and concerns, but ideally no later than 36 weeks. And remember, this is your communication tool. So when you arrive at your place of birth, you can get on with the job of giving birth and not feel the need to argue or feel intimidated about aspects of care or comfort that you feel strongly about. And everyone has clear expectations of what will happen or what is expected to happen. This will give you the opportunity to be central to the discussion about your care. But of course, you can change your mind about anything at any time. If after listening to this talk about how to write your birth plan and you feel like, you'd really like to spend some one-on-one time really editing and defining and refining your birth plan for maximum efficacy, I can definitely spend some time with you in person or via Zoom or Skype and really help you step by step through the process, all the way from brainstorming through to presenting and discussing it with your care provider. You can email me anytime at jen@jenniferhuzzy.com or call me on 0490 045 416. Good luck with your birth planning, and I look forward to hearing